That night, when everyone else was asleep, I sat quietly in the corner of that room, staring at the person who once meant my entire world. It's strange. He looked completely fine, as if nothing mattered to him. But I knew better. The slight moisture in his eyes, the tiny tremor he tried to hide, was the weight of my silence he had never bothered to notice until it was too late. My heart ached, but I stayed quiet because my words never seemed to reach him anyway. The silence of that night was louder than my own heartbeat, and each breath felt like it was breaking me apart from the inside. I watched him, wondering if he ever realized just how much I had been silently shattering. Or was he always so blind that my quiet pain was invisible to him? My hands had gone cold, but my heart was still beating for him. In that single moment, I understood that love doesn't always need proof. Sometimes it's about letting go. But the pain of leaving behind what you once cherished is the heaviest of all. I stepped toward the door, yet it felt like my soul was still trapped in that room. He remained silent, and my silence, the burden he could never understand, hung between us. Perhaps he sensed it and feared it. As I looked at him one last time, I felt that if I didn't move now, I might never leave. That night, I walked away for the first time for myself, without telling him that every breath I had taken, every piece of me, had been his. The door closed with a soft click, as if even the air mourned my departure, carrying with it the weight of everything I had left behind. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, my breaths grew heavy, as if I had left half of my heart behind in that room. The cold night air brushed against my face, yet it was nothing compared to the chill inside me. The streets were quiet, but inside my mind, every memory of him echoed relentlessly. Each step I took felt like a fragment of my past was breaking off and falling to the ground, leaving me hollow yet strangely aware. My hands trembled slightly, but my tears refused to fall. Perhaps I had already cried enough along the way. Yet behind me in that room, he must have felt the weight of my absence for the first time. I was certain he finally understood, in some small fleeting moment, how much I had endured silently. But what good is realization after the fact? By the time one notices, the heart has already walked away. I continued down the empty street, glancing back once, only to remind myself that the life I was leaving behind would never be mine again. The door through which I had exited once held my first steps of happiness. Now it was just a memory of what I had lost. I realized that sometimes silence becomes the heaviest burden of all, and the one who carries it is the only one truly punished. I walked further, allowing the night to swallow me, letting each shadow and each whisper of the wind remind me that some people never truly understand the weight of someone else's quiet suffering. With every step, I felt my resolve harden. It wasn't just about leaving him anymore. It was about reclaiming the parts of me I had sacrificed for someone who never saw their value. That night, I finally understood. Walking away wasn't an act of cowardice. It was the first courageous step toward my own life, my own freedom, and my own healing. I kept walking through the quiet night, but every step felt heavier than the last. The streets, empty and silent, mirrored the emptiness I carried inside. Memories of him clung to me like shadows I couldn't shake, whispering everything I had endured in silence. It was strange. People leave, yet their absence sometimes weighs more than their presence. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, waiting for him to notice, for him to care, for him to see the girl who had given everything. Yet he never did. Every laugh I forced, every word I swallowed, every tear I hid, they all seemed meaningless to someone who had no understanding of what love really demanded. And that realization burned deeper than any argument, any heartbreak, or any loss I had ever faced. Love should feel mutual, but mine had been one-sided, a river flowing into a desert. I recalled the times I had tried to explain myself, the nights I had silently begged him to understand, and the mornings I had pretended everything was fine, just so he wouldn't see the cracks in me. It was exhausting, living for someone who couldn't recognize your pain, your sacrifice, your existence. Yet here I was, still walking, still breathing, still somehow moving forward. The night didn't feel lonely now. It felt alive with the weight of my newfound awareness. Every step was a reminder that I was no longer his possession, no longer bound to his indifference. For the first time, the ache in my chest felt purposeful. It was the pulse of someone beginning to reclaim herself, someone learning that survival isn't just physical, it's emotional. And in that quiet, in that cold, under the dim glow of streetlights, I made a silent promise to myself. I would no longer beg to be seen, no longer cry to be acknowledged. I was walking away not just from him, but from the version of myself that had existed only for someone else. As I continued down the empty streets, the cold night air wrapped around me, but strangely it didn't feel harsh. Instead, it felt like a cleansing, as if the wind was carrying away the years of pain and silent suffering I had endured. My steps grew steadier, yet every corner I passed reminded me of him, of all the moments I had given, all the nights I had spent hoping he would notice, all the times I had whispered my heart silently, praying he would hear. But he never did. Each memory struck me like a quiet dagger, and yet I did not falter. The weight of years of unspoken words pressed on me. Yet with each step, I felt a little lighter. I remembered the countless times I had tried to explain myself, only to be dismissed, belittled, or ignored. I remembered the nights I had cried silently, the tears that fell for someone who never asked if I was hurting. And yet here I was alive, walking away from it all. It was as if the darkness around me mirrored the darkness I had carried inside. And yet, in that very darkness, a small light of clarity had begun to grow. I realized that my pain, my suffering, my heartbreak, they were mine, not his. I had been carrying it for him, expecting acknowledgement, love, care, and received nothing in return. But now, even though my heart still ached, I felt strength for the first time. Strength that came from knowing that leaving was not weakness but courage. Courage to reclaim myself, to honor my own heart, to finally prioritize my own life. As I walked, I whispered into the night, I will no longer let someone else's indifference define my value. And for the first time it felt real. I was free. Free to breathe, free to feel, free to finally begin again without waiting for someone else's permission or approval. Each step I took that night felt heavier and yet strangely empowering. The streets were quiet, almost reverent, as if the city itself knew the magnitude of what I was doing. Leaving behind not just a person, but years of heartbreak, disappointment, and silent suffering. Every corner reminded me of moments I had once treasured. Laughter we shared, promises whispered, dreams we built together. And yet, beneath all that, there had always been a void, a lack of understanding, a constant feeling of being unseen, unheard, unvalued. I remembered the countless times I had hoped he would notice my pain, acknowledge my sacrifices, or simply ask if I was okay. But he never did. Love should lift you, not leave you gasping for breath while carrying someone else's indifference. And now, walking alone through the night, I realized that leaving wasn't just necessary, it was survival. I was no longer willing to pour my soul into someone who could never understand its depth. The city lights flickered in the distance, but they didn't distract me. They guided me. They whispered that this path, though lonely and uncertain, was mine to claim. Each step forward felt like reclaiming fragments of myself I had surrendered over the years. I remembered the nights I cried silently, the tears no one saw, the heartbreak I endured without acknowledgement. And yet, tonight, those tears had transformed into resolve. I was no longer running from him, I was walking toward myself, toward the life I deserved, toward love that sees and values me, toward freedom from the weight of a love that had only demanded and never given. With every breath, I felt the heavy chains of unspoken words and unreciprocated love loosening. And in that quiet, solitary walk, I understood that leaving wasn't losing. It was finally winning the right to my own heart, my own peace, my own life. I walked on, letting the cool night air brush against my face, and for the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Each step forward felt like shedding layers of myself that had been worn thin by endless disappointment. I remembered the countless mornings I had forced a smile for someone who never noticed the effort. The countless nights I had lain awake replaying conversations in my head, wondering why he never understood my heart. It was exhausting, and yet I had persisted, hoping that one day he would see me for who I truly was. But tonight, as I moved through the quiet streets, I realized that waiting for recognition from someone incapable of understanding was pointless. My pain, my love, my loyalty, they were mine to honor, not his to overlook. I recalled the times I had tried to express myself, only to be met with indifference or dismissal. The words I had swallowed, the emotions I had hidden, had built walls inside me that I hadn't known how to tear down. Now, with each step, those walls began to crumble. The shadows of the night didn't frighten me. They embraced me, reminding me that I was still alive, still breathing, still capable of feeling. I was walking not just away from him, but toward the version of myself I had long ignored, the one who deserved love, respect, and recognition. I realized that leaving didn't make me weak. It made me courageous. Courageous enough to step away from someone who couldn't see my worth, and strong enough to choose myself over a love that had only taken. And in that quiet, endless night, I felt the tiniest spark of hope flicker within me. A hope that, even after all the heartbreak, I could find my own happiness, my own peace, and my own voice again. The streets stretched endlessly before me, silent witnesses to the turmoil inside my heart. The night sky was dark, yet for the first time, the darkness didn't feel suffocating, it felt honest. Each shadow that crossed my path mirrored the shadows I had carried within me for years. I thought about the countless moments I had given my all, moments when I had exposed my heart fully, only to be met with cold indifference. The realization that I had been loving someone who could never truly see me was painful, yet liberating. Painful because it confirmed the truth I had avoided for so long, liberating because finally, I could acknowledge it and let it go. I remembered every word I had swallowed, every tear I had hidden, every silent plea for him to understand my pain. And now, walking alone, I began to recognize that all of it had been for me, not for him. The sorrow had been mine to carry, and now I could release it. The wind swept past me, carrying with it the echoes of laughter and promises that had never materialized. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. Each step forward was a step toward myself, toward reclaiming the life and heart I had given away. I realized that my worth wasn't defined by his recognition or affection. It was inherent, untouchable, and mine. For the first time, I felt the courage to fully embrace that truth. I was no longer a prisoner of unreciprocated love. I was free. My tears, when they fell, were not of despair. They were of release. Release from the weight of years of being unseen, unheard, and unvalued. And with each drop that fell, I felt lighter, stronger, more alive. That night, I understood that leaving wasn't an end. It was a beginning of reclaiming my heart, my life, and my self-respect. I paused at a street corner, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs, and for the first time, I allowed myself to truly breathe. The silence around me mirrored the silence I had carried inside for years, but now it didn't feel heavy. It felt freeing. I remembered the countless nights I had waited for him to notice my pain, to ask if I was okay, to see the depth of my heart, and every time I was met with nothing. That emptiness had become familiar, but now I realized it didn't have to define me. Every memory that once felt like a chain now felt like a stepping stone. The moments I had poured my heart into, the tears I had shed in solitude, the quiet desperation I had endured, they were mine to own, and finally, I was ready to claim them. I thought of the smiles I had forced, the laughter I had faked, the love I had given so freely, and how it had been taken for granted. But walking alone through the streets that night, I understood something vital. Leaving was not defeat. It was empowerment. Every step forward was a choice to honor my own heart, to prioritize my well-being, to reclaim the parts of myself that had been lost in his indifference. I realized that survival wasn't just about moving physically. It was about moving emotionally, breaking free from the chains of unacknowledged love. The city lights flickered softly, and I felt a strange sense of companionship in their glow, as if they were silently acknowledging my courage. I was no longer running from the past. I was walking toward myself, toward a life where my worth was seen, where my pain was respected, and where my heart could finally heal. For the first time, leaving felt like stepping into light, rather than falling into darkness. The night seemed endless, yet with every step, I felt more alive than I had in years. The streets were quiet, but inside me, a storm of memories and emotions raged. Memories of laughter that once felt sacred, promises that had been broken, and dreams that had crumbled under the weight of indifference. I remembered every time I had tried to express myself, only to be met with dismissal. Every tear I had shed in silence, every word left unspoken, had carved a deep ache in my soul. And yet, as I walked, I realized something profound. My pain had taught me strength that no one could take away. I no longer needed his recognition or approval to validate my worth. Every step I took through the night was a declaration. I am more than his neglect, more than his disregard, more than the love he could never give me. I remembered the nights I had stayed awake, hoping he would see me, hoping he would care, and how futile it had all been. But that futility had brought clarity. I understood now that survival isn't about waiting for someone else to notice your value. It's about realizing it yourself. I let the cold wind sweep past me, feeling it brush against my tears, carrying away years of sorrow. For the first time, I felt the weight of unreciprocated love lift slightly, replaced by the possibility of hope. Hope that I could rebuild, reclaim, and redefine my life on my own terms. That night, I walked not toward an uncertain future, but toward a version of myself that had always been there. Strong, resilient, and capable of loving without losing herself. I realized that leaving was not losing. It was the first step toward truly finding myself. I walked past the familiar streets, each shadow and flickering light reminding me of moments I had once treasured and moments that had quietly broken me. I remembered the times I had tried to speak, to make him see me, to make him understand, but my words had fallen on deaf ears. Every tear, every sigh, every quiet act of love had been invisible to him. And now, walking alone in the night, I realized how much of myself I had given away for someone who could never see my heart. The air was cold, but it felt strangely comforting, like it was cleansing the pain I had carried silently for years. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my emotions without guilt, without apology. Each step forward was a step away from a love that had demanded too much and given too little. I realized that being brave wasn't about staying, it was about leaving. Leaving the person who never valued you. Leaving the life that suffocated your soul. Leaving the version of yourself that had existed only to be seen through someone else's eyes. I thought about all the nights I had cried quietly, all the times I had forced a smile, all the ways I had tried to earn his attention. And I understood now that nothing I had done was wrong. The fault was never mine. Walking in the dim streetlights, I felt a strange power rising within me. I was no longer fragile, no longer pleading, no longer invisible. I was reclaiming my heart one step at a time. And as the night wrapped around me, I finally understood that leaving wasn't just an act of survival. It was an act of self-respect, the first step toward truly living for myself. The city felt endless, but I walked on, feeling the quiet strength building inside me with every step. The memories that once haunted me now felt like teachers, showing me exactly what I had endured and what I deserved. I remembered the countless nights I had waited for him to care, to notice my pain, to ask if I was okay, and every time I had been met with silence or indifference. Those moments, once painful, now fueled my determination. I realized that I had been giving my heart to someone incapable of understanding it, someone who could never appreciate its depth. The tears I had shed in the past were no longer symbols of weakness. They were proof of my endurance, evidence of the courage it had taken to love so fully and silently. As I walked beneath the dim streetlights, I noticed how each shadow seemed to guide me, pushing me forward rather than holding me back. My heart still ached, but the ache had a purpose now. It reminded me that I had survived, that I had learned, that I had finally begun to see my own worth. For years, I had been invisible in his eyes, but tonight I was entirely visible to myself. Every step reaffirmed that I was no longer defined by his indifference, no longer confined by unreciprocated love. I was free to reclaim my life, my heart, and my identity. And in that quiet, solitary walk, I finally understood that leaving him wasn't a loss. It was the most significant act of love I could give myself. From that night onward, I vowed never to allow anyone's disregard to diminish my light again. The night grew colder, but I no longer felt the emptiness I had carried for so long. Instead, a strange warmth of resolve coursed through me. Every step I took seemed to shake off the years of neglect, the silent suffering, and the invisible battles I had fought within myself. I remembered the countless times I had tried to explain my feelings, only to be dismissed, ignored, or misunderstood. Every tear I had shed, every sigh, every silent plea, they had all been invisible to the one I had loved so deeply. And yet, tonight, the weight of all those years didn't crush me, it strengthened me. I realized that my pain had value, that my heart had depth, and that my love had never been a weakness. It had been a testament to my capacity to feel. I thought about the smiles I had faked, the laughter I had forced, and the endless efforts I had made to keep him happy while he remained oblivious. Now, walking alone in the quiet streets, I felt my self-worth awaken. I understood that my love didn't need validation from someone who could never recognize it. The night air carried a sense of promise, a reminder that life had more to offer beyond heartbreak and disappointment. I breathed deeply, letting the wind wash away the last remnants of doubt, shame, and sorrow. I was no longer clinging to a love that had drained me. I was moving toward a life where I could truly see myself, value myself, and honor the depth of my own emotions. Each step was a declaration. I deserved to be seen, heard, and cherished, not by anyone else but first and foremost by myself. That night I began to fully understand the true meaning of self-love. And for the first time, I felt unshakable. I walked past familiar streets and empty squares, yet everything felt new, as if the city itself had transformed to mirror the change inside me. The memories of him, once sharp and painful, now felt like distant echoes, reminders of how much I had endured and how strong I had become. I remembered every argument, every cold glance, every time my heart had reached out for acknowledgement and been met with nothing. Those moments, which once left me shattered, had now become evidence of my resilience. I realized that I had spent years bending myself to fit someone else's indifference, but tonight, I refused to shrink any longer. The wind whispered against my skin, carrying away the weight I had held silently for so long. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel fully, not just the pain but the courage and strength that had grown from it. I thought of the nights I had cried alone, hoping for his attention, and the days I had pretended everything was fine. Those tears were not wasted. They were part of my journey, teaching me the value of self-respect and the power of walking away. Each step forward was a reclaiming of my life, my heart, and my dignity. I realized that freedom doesn't come from being with someone who loves you. It comes from loving yourself enough to leave behind what no longer serves you. The ache in my chest remained, but it was no longer a burden. It was a pulse of life, reminding me that I was alive, I was capable, and I was deserving of love that sees and honors me. That night, the darkness around me felt like a partner in my rebirth, guiding me toward a life where I could finally be whole again. The streets were quiet, yet my mind was alive with memories I could no longer ignore. Every corner I passed seemed to whisper fragments of the past. Laughs we shared, promises broken, the subtle neglect that had chipped away at my soul. I thought about how long I had endured, how many nights I had begged silently for him to notice, for him to care, for him to see me. And I realized that waiting for someone incapable of understanding had stolen years from me. But tonight, the weight of all that suffering felt different. It wasn't crushing me anymore. It was transforming me. Each step I took reminded me that leaving was not weakness, it was courage. I had loved deeply, silently, and patiently, and now I was choosing myself. I remembered the tears I had hidden, the words I had swallowed, the dreams I had abandoned for him. And now I allowed myself to feel them fully, not to sink into despair, but to acknowledge their meaning and let them go. I was reclaiming my life piece by piece, step by step. The wind carried away my pain, and the night embraced me like a silent witness to my liberation. For the first time, I realized that the ache in my chest wasn't a sign of loss. It was a reminder that I had survived, that I had endured, and that I was finally free to walk into a future of my own making. I was no longer invisible, no longer diminished by someone else's indifference. I was alive, I was whole, and I was ready to rebuild myself with the courage and love I had long denied. That night, I understood that leaving was not an end. It was the first step toward everything I deserved. I stopped for a moment under a dim streetlight, holding the weight of everything I had endured. The quiet night surrounded me, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like a witness to my transformation. I thought about the years I had given, the love I had poured silently into someone who never noticed, and the countless tears I had shed in solitude. Each memory stung, yet it also reminded me of my strength, my endurance, and my courage. I understood finally that leaving him wasn't a loss, it was a reclaiming of myself. I let the cold night air fill my lungs, letting go of the pain, the heartbreak, and the invisible chains I had carried for so long. My heart still ached, but it was no longer heavy. It was alive, awake, and ready to love again, this time for myself. I whispered to the night, I am enough, I am worthy, I am free, and for the first time in years I felt complete. This journey had not been easy, but every step, every tear, every silent moment of pain had led me here, to a place of self-respect, healing, and courage. And now I walk into the rest of my life with my head held high, knowing that my heart belongs to me first. If you felt this story, if it touched your heart even a little, don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Truth. Every story here is real, raw, and heartfelt, and your support means the world. Click subscribe and let's continue to share stories that heal, inspire, and remind us that even in pain, we are never truly alone. Red Heart.